Trying to learn art without a mentor that will help you understand and overcome your roadblocks to learning is very hard. This is because we all have different styles and paces of learning, absorbing information, and the amount in which we can apply what we learned. Drawing is not just done with your hands, but also with your brain. Artists have to develop both a visual library and their hands' ability to catch up to what they're envisioning. As someone who didn't go to art school, I lacked the accessibility to feedback from professionals, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't improve without it. Because there is a very underrated learning skill that we're all capable of using, which is observation. Specifically, observation of your own art, other people's art, and nature. When I was a beginner, I used to just never reflect on what looked wrong in my drawings, what I could have done better, or what parts I struggled with. If I was already satisfied with my skill level, it wouldn't have mattered. But I wanted to improve, so being dissatisfied with at least a single element of my work, and to want to do something about it, was necessary if I wanted to get good. That being said, in order to improve, it's important to know that drawing is not just about learning the skill itself. It is also about forming a habit and making a study plan that works for you. Being aware of how you learn is a lot more important than you think. When I was starting out, I used to draw 6 to 10 hours a day, but that doesn't mean all those hours were quality hours. I spent a majority of those hours mindlessly doodling and not reflecting on what I'm actually trying to learn, and I know because I've gone through it. I just thought, well, if I draw enough hours, I'm bound to improve. Which is true to some extent, but it has its limits. You can be the best at drawing stick figures if you draw it enough times, which obviously wasn't my goal, yet I prioritized quantity over quality for self-satisfaction. For the sake of saying I was productive today, when in fact I was essentially wasting my time. There was no input of new information that would help me improve. I was just pulling things out of my already limited visual library. I was avoiding the pain of learning something new and chose to do something in my comfort zone, but in doing so, I kept holding myself back from improvement. It's hard to unlearn bad habits. When you've done something enough times, you convince yourself that it's the right thing to do. I would draw people in the same poses and then wonder why they look odd when I try to draw them in different ones, when I didn't even stop to think of a good way to approach a problem. I made a lot more mistakes that made progress harder for me, and another one of those mistakes was learning everything I could about a subject that is too detail-oriented for my skill level. I remember studying anatomy like I was preparing for a science exam, thinking that once I get everything down, I'd be immediately able to apply it. But it doesn't really work that way. Because I was unfamiliar with form or volume, and I didn't even know how to draw a simple shape in more than 2 angles, it was a given that I wouldn't be able to draw complex shapes like the human body. It was like learning how to run when I could barely even crawl. This is the major reason why I kept backtracking to things that I already supposedly studied. Sure, I can say that I studied about all these muscle groups, but because I didn't really know how to apply them to my art, I was bound to forget them. I would often study things in depth because I thought that the learning process would be very linear, that once I finished learning anatomy, I'd be able to move on to color, light, and so on. But I soon realized that trying to max out one skill before moving on to the next isn't the best way for me to learn art. It was more ideal for me to improve one level higher for each component over time. So instead, I changed my approach. I decided what to study based on what I immediately wanted to test and apply in my art. I envisioned an illustration I wanted to draw, pointed out the stuff that I couldn't draw yet but had planned to put in that illustration, and learned how to draw those things through reference and observation. I chose to draw a scene that wouldn't be too intimidating, yet one that still gave me the chance to learn something that I didn't know. Doing so not only gave me motivation, but helped me retain what I learned a lot better because I set myself up to be able to apply what I studied. And repeating that process made me improve not just my visual library, but also my approach to studying over time. I learned that developing my drawing skills involved a lot of problem solving. I'd identify a problem and take tiny steps to solve it. Rinse and repeat. Sometimes I'd even change my workflow. I would look for references first, choose a drawing that I found good in my standards, and I would point out an element I like from it. For example, if I like the color scheme, I would then use that color scheme in my illustration and try to observe what I want to learn, how the colors change when they're in light and shadow, how much contrast there is, and so on. Another important thing that I learned is that sometimes Not drawing helps even more than drawing an insane amount of hours daily. You can still learn through observation alone. A specific example is when I paid really close attention to how my shirt moves when I move my arms and my torso. I was just looking at a mirror, trying to observe what I could about the folds, where they occur, and why they occur in the places they do. I asked myself why the white shirts outside looked like they were blue when they were in the shade. And I learned through research that those shirts had a blue tint to them because their major source of light wasn't the sun, but the sky. It was ambient light that made the white shirt look blue. As I just emphasized, observation is so important that drawing without some form of it is a huge time loss if you're trying to improve as efficiently as possible, because you just end up drawing more hours but not learning as well as you could if your study was more focused. You can learn a lot more even while putting in less hours, as long as you have a clear goal and you know your personal best way to approach it. Your experience in school is a good way to find out your studying style, and I think that's one of the most important things that school teaches us. Through long-term studying, you get to figure out the best way to learn and how to form habits that work for you in the long run. Learning how you work and taking advantage of it is the key to efficient improvement. This was kind of a messy voiceover, but I'm glad I was able to talk about this topic. As always, I hope you liked it and the illustration as well. Thanks for sticking around.